Hello everybody and welcome back to Juno New Origins, where last episode we made our delivery using this ridiculous thing in the most ridiculous possible manner, and it was amazing. I love it. There's definitely a few things that we could alter with this. We could make the wings detachable once we no longer need those to reduce the mass, and we could also fix our deployment mechanism. That would be a useful thing. And also adding some solar panels up here, but I don't know if we'll ever use this thing again. Hopefully we don't. We do have 17 tech points. Oh, right, we actually got the... I was going to say that we need to get the tech point here, or the tech item here, Engineering Masterpiece, but we got that. So that's fine. That's absolutely fine. We now need to find ourselves a contract. So we've got these station bits here, and none of these give tech points and are awkward and kind of buggy. I like doing this. This is neat, but I don't know that that's actually what we're interested in. None of these are progression. Okay, let's go ahead and refresh our contracts, which we did not do previously. Okay, Speedy Pollution. This is going to unlock the DSC large pad. Okay, the craft mass has to remain above a kiloton, and we have to get it into orbit. Noted. So that's definitely big. Very big. So if we were to go into here, a kiloton. So a kiloton is 1,000 tons, right? So this current design here is 74.8 tons. What is the design for that Silero lander? This is 2.59 kilotons, but the question is, when we get this into orbit, does this remain? And how much are we getting paid for this? I didn't even look at that. 10 million? Okay, 10 million is nothing. So we're just going to assume we're going to lose money on this. We're just unlocking the pad. That's fine. Let's put this out on the pad right now, and I'm going to launch this from the DSC launch pad. And we're just going to, I don't think it's even possible to put a kiloton into orbit for $10 million, to be honest with you. We're going to launch this thing right like this. And the question is, are we going to remain above 1 kiloton in mass? I don't know that we will, but I want to know how far that's going to have to go. So let's lift this thing off, and we're going to keep an eye on our craft mass, which you can see is already plummeting, which isn't shocking. I have a sneaking suspicion this is not going to be above 1 kiloton when it gets into orbit. I'd be shocked if it was above 1 kiloton. We're down to 1.8 at this moment. Okay. So we're going to ditch these side boosters shortly. There we go. It was very awkward, but I'm sure it's fine. And we probably have more than enough vertical speed here. Let's see here. Apoapsis. Actually, no, we don't. We're going to have our pitch be at like 20 or so. We're at 1.16 kilotons right now. So yeah, I really don't think that this is going to function. I think we're going to have to build a new ship bespoke for this, which is not shocking. So 1.07, 1.06, yeah, this is going to definitely drop below. So that's not going to be a thing. We're going to have to make ourselves a new craft. That's fine. So let's go ahead and make ourselves a new one. And I'm going to save this as kiloton. Okay, and now I want to put in a fuel tank here in the center. So you might ask, why would we want a fuel tank there? The answer is because we want to just make this be dead weight. So this is currently 176 tons. Now it's 326 tons. Now this is about half the weight that we need. 865 tons. That is 1.03 kilotons. 1.02, 1.01, 1 kiloton. Okay, so this is exactly 1 kiloton here, and then this guy here, it has a little bit of mass to it, so that should count as well. So now we're going to have to lift this, right? And that's going to get a bit complicated. We're going to use side interstages for this for sure. And the question is, what kind of side interstages? How are we going to deliver this to orbit? So I'm going to have fuel tanks here. And these fuel tanks are going to need to be pretty big. We're going to have them be like a radius of at least 2 meters. Like that. And then I'm going to attach that there. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use some pretty heavy lift engines, but I do want to have, I think, some hemispherical tanks up top. There we go. And we can have them be a little bit more robust than this. A length of about 2 meters will be fine. Sure, that looks good. So that'll be okay. We can have this be fueled, and I'm going to want the fuel type to be Carolox. Probably. Actually, no. Hydrolox is what we want, isn't it? Now that we have that new type of engine unlocked, well, let's see what that looks like. So that is the Titan engine that uses Hydrolox and staged combustion. This is a Methalox engine here. Okay. So the question is, if we put a Titan engine onto this, what does that look like for thrust to weight? So that is about 1/4 of a thrust to weight. Interesting. So we could definitely do something with that right now. So this is Hydrolox, staged power cycle, and liquid fuel. So it starts at 140. What's the specific impulse? Not applicable. Okay. So I can see here that GIMP was popping up a tooltip here. I don't know why. That's the image editor that I use for thumbnail making. I don't know why it was popping up a tooltip there. That was very strange. Regardless, we can see that at altitude, there's some shock diamonds here. So we're going to want to probably increase our nozzle throat size, which is going to significantly reduce our burn time, right? But we're going to want that to be at least like 85%. I'm pretty concerned about the burn time, actually. Burn time is 48 seconds right now. So that is definitely concerning. This is a lot of dead weight. That's going to significantly complicate this design. So I do want to put this in like quad symmetry here, something like that. We might have to increase the size of the standoff here, but we can see that that puts us at 1.19. Okay. So that is definitely noted. The chamber pressure is currently maxed. Interesting. I was noting the shock diamonds there. So this is not going to get to orbit, right? But I want to see where it gets to. It's not going to get very far. But let's just get a feel of how this is going. Okay. Are we thinking SRBs? We're kind of thinking SRBs. For sure. I'm thinking SRBs right now. So we're going to pull this back, and we're going to change the fuel type here. I'm going to get rid of these engines for the moment. And I'm also thinking about dropping this down to about... Actually, let's keep this at about 20 meters in length. And we can put on some SRBs here to get ourselves off of the ground, is the idea. So that would mean that we're going to be using... probably Phoenix solid boosters. So I'd like to boost the size of these up to be like that. Now you can see we're definitely going to need to detach that and increase the size on these SRBs, or rather on these detachments. They're still a little close together, but that is reasonably fine. You can see this is a much better thrust to weight, but it's only going to have a 19-second burn time. Okay, I'm going to detach this. And we're going to move these higher up now. So I'm going to put this about here. And then I'm going to duplicate this. We're going to attach that there. Then I'm going to reduce that height down to about 5 or 6 meters, something like that. Then I'm going to put an interstage here. Doesn't need to be this long. Something like, well, actually, it's going to need to be that long because we're going to need to have engines here. So we're going to want to have something like... Do we want to go with methalox here? This would be 357 meters per second, but if we're in vacuum, 387. So obviously, this is full flow staged and methalox, which is a little much, I feel like. Okay, I'm just looking at the thrust to weights here. I wish it was giving us the specific impulse. Sadly, it's claiming a not applicable specific impulse. Okay, so this is a nozzle size here, but we would want that to be pretty low. The chamber pressure we could definitely reduce in theory. What if we ran it something like that? Now, this is probably not going to be necessarily ideal. Okay, I don't know why it was having those clipped together like that. That was strange. But then we would put the SRBs down here, like that, right? And then I'd like to move, not like that, hang on, undo. I'd like to move these to be up here. And then I'm going to put a nose cone, or not really a nose cone, but a hemisphere about here. And we're not going to have any fuel in that. I want that to just be a little bit of protection up there for now. Okay, so this doesn't have a lot in terms of maneuverability. We don't have much for gyroscopes. We don't have much for battery power. We don't have much for a lot of things. We can put some gyros in here, and battery is probably going to be an issue. This is not going to get us to orbit, to be clear. I just want to see where we're at this point. So the Phoenixes and then the interstages here. Yeah. Okay, so that looks fine. Let's launch this, and let's see where this puts us. This is going to be very strange. No doubt about it. So let's bring ourselves over to 70 degrees. We don't have gimbal, so we're going to have a hard time actually getting there. This is mostly going to be taking us straight up. And let's see if these clipping together a little bit cause problems. It may or it may not. Okay. So this is not lifting us very high off the ground. Right? That's not shocking. Okay, so we're ramping down. And there we go. And now we can see we've currently got a thrust to weight of 0.24. So obviously we need quite a lot more. I'm also very concerned as I think about this. Expansion here is going to mean that this core is going to start taking heat damage. So this concept, I think, is very unlikely to be functional. Okay. So with that in mind, we're going to have to probably go a little bit more oniony with this design. That's fine. We can definitely do that. So what we're going to do then is we're going to change this design to be a bit more like this. And I'm going to want to run these. I'm thinking about having at least 2 sets of engines here, like this. And maybe 1 centrally located engine like that, although we would have to allow fuel flow through here, like this. We would get rid of this, and we would duplicate this guy. And then the SRBs would go on the outside here. We need to change the overall position here, and this would need to be out over here. This is currently using methalox, so this would need to switch to methalox. This would need to change to solid, and then this would be moved down to about here, like that, then. I'm actually going to lower it a little bit more because I'm concerned about the clipping. Okay, so something like that. If we look at the overall delta V of this is still not enough, and that is absolutely understood. But for the time being, I want to check in. Do we want to run it separately like this? Or do we want to fuel flow it? I'm just thinking about that. I think for the moment we're going to run it separately, and let's... What is the issue? Missing a methalox source. It kind of isn't. It kind of isn't. We could, I suppose, make this have some methalox in it. So fill it with fuel and make that be methalox. Are we still missing a methalox source? Yeah, it thinks that this engine is missing methalox. The intention is for that to flow in with fuel transfer like this. I suppose one thing we could do is we could try to fill this with fuel. Although, it apparently can't hold any, possibly because of the dead weight. Uh-huh. Well, it needs to be a kiloton in mass. Okay, let's go ahead and launch this, and launch anyway. I want to see if we are, in fact, getting methalox flow to that central engine. So let's lift this guy off, and let's see how this goes. I don't expect it to be phenomenal, but it'll be a little bit better than our last run. Okay. This is, of course, a very, very large amount of mass, and I'm wondering right now if we want to have a higher thrust to weight through this section or not. I don't know. This is carrying us up reasonably well. Let's see what our thrust to weight is like after we do this detachment and engine light. Okay, we're ramping down. That's about 30 kilometers of apoapsis from those SRBs. We can increase the size and burn time of the SRBs if we really wanted to as well. So that's okay for the moment, and we can see at this point our thrust to weight is 0.39. That center engine is indeed not burning. So it's very clear at this point that the issue is that this fuel tank cannot actually transfer because it's full on dead weight. So that means that this engine is useless weight, and we should probably just get rid of it. So that is understood, and our thrust to weight is too low at this point, but this is definitely an interesting result. So this is going up to about 40 kilometers at this juncture, and obviously our thrust to weight is too low, but that's not actually necessarily a problem. So let's pull this back. Let's get rid of the mass of this engine, which will also save us some money. This thing is going to be expensive, and we know that. So I'm going to immediately raise this up to about 40 meters. This is going to be very strange, but let's raise that up to about 40 meters. I have no idea what that detachment is going to feel like, by the way. That's going to be interesting. I kind of want to change this to be about here and have this go at the bottom instead of at the top. Okay, so that'll be more burn time, which is fine. I actually didn't look at how our battery was doing, so that is an interesting question as well. Okay, let's put ourselves at about 70 degrees. And SRBs are lifting us off. So we've got plenty of thrust to weight here. As far as the SRB directionality goes, we can't really steer them. They don't gimbal. Or at least, not by default. Can you have gimbaling SRBs in this game? I know in KSP there are a couple of them. But we could do attitude control another way, or we could just be like, you know what, we're just going to launch straight up with the SRBs. That's fine. That's also a distinct option. So with that additional SRB fuel, we can see that our apoapsis is going up quite a lot further. We've only got a couple more seconds of burn time here. Okay, we're in ramp down. But yeah, that apoapsis, a lot higher up. So that's a little bit better anyway. This is not going to get us exactly where we want to go. but it's not terrible. So this thrust to weight is now 0.4. Obviously, we're going to need quite a lot more orbital velocity than this. And this is going to need to be bumped up in the amount of thrust that it has, which is fine. We, I think, have room to potentially expand this up to 4 engines. And what's our burn time here? 5.3 minutes? Okay, so we've got lots of burn time there to bump up our thrust. That would bring us up to not quite 1.0 thrust to weight, which might actually be enough. I'm just looking at this apoapsis for now. Our main issue at this moment is going to be the lateral speed, because our mission is to raise our periapsis, right? So the lateral speed is going to be the main problem going forward. Let's pull this back. We already know how this is going to play out. It's not going to achieve orbit, and that's fine. So now I want to think about doing this. I want to move these engines a little bit to be kind of like that. And then we would have another one out over here. And we barely have enough room here. I'm not sure if those are going to cause heating issues. They might. We will see. You can see this is very expensive, and that's fine. I'm viewing this as cost is no object. We just want to unlock this new location. That's the idea here. Okay, so we're going to go straight up here. I'm going to move this over to 70. Let's go to 2x speed. So that's going to be a little bit more weight, so we're not going to get quite as far on these SRBs, which is fine. We could, of course, extend the length of these tanks. I don't think that's a good idea, because thrust to weight is already our primary concern on that. So we've got 5 seconds left. 3, 2, 1, and 0. Okay, SRBs are burned out, and we're moving. Okay, so you can see here, 0.81 as our initial thrust to weight. Okay, so apoapsis is hanging out reasonably okay at about 65 kilometers. Thrust to weight is up to 0.9. This might actually, we're going to have a delta V issue, but this might actually have the thrust to weight to get us there, which is interesting for sure. So this is 1.0 thrust to weight now. You can see our apoapsis is high enough. I'm going to pitch us over. We need lateral speed. So we're not going to have the thrust to weight that we need, or actually we do have the thrust to weight that we need right now. We can achieve orbit with this thrust to weight. The main thing that we're lacking now is burn time. So we've got about 55 seconds of extra burn time. I want to see where exactly we end up being, and you can see time to apoapsis is ticking down here, which isn't surprising, but I want to see what our orbital, or actually more specifically, our lateral velocity ends up being by the end of this burn. Now, we can make a more efficient ascent trajectory for sure, but I don't think we can do that on the order of 2 kilometers per second. So we're going to have to expand this, and that's fine. So 1.16 kilometers per second. We definitely need a fair amount of additional burn time in this, but that's an interesting result. So let's go ahead and pull that back. And there's a couple of things that we can do. Thing number 1, we can expand these vertically down. So we need to detach all of these engines and expand this vertically down to about here. And that'll give us more burn time at the cost of our thrust to weight. So that is going to be interesting to try to find that balance, right? But this is not going to ultimately be the... And these are pretty clipped together here. I don't love that. Can we increase the size of these at all more? No. We could put a strut on and have it connect to the strut. I don't know that that's a great idea. I'm pretty sure that if we burn this right now, if we burned all of these, it would be problematic. Let's go ahead and move these engines over real quick and run a test. The idea here is to see if these SRBs overheat due to the clipping. They might. So we'll throttle this up. We'll put this at 70 degrees since we will have gimbaling. Yeah, we're seeing parts taking over expansion damage. So that is going to be these guys taking Yeah. That's about what I expected to see. So we had our lower altitude engines taking overexpansion damage, and then we had these engines taking overexpansion damage. Then we had these taking heat damage. So that's obviously not ideal, right? No doubt about that. Let's move our Phoenix solid rocket boosters into another stage here, which is going to be down here. And let's try running these separately. I'm pretty sure this is going to now run into a thrust to weight issue, but I want to test it real quick. Okay. So let's go ahead and run this in 2x, and let's see if this runs into that thrust to weight issue as predicted. The SRBs are able, on their own, to lift us up reasonably high. Now, we can increase the burn time on these SRBs if we wanted to. So that's an option. We could also expand this out and have another onion shell. That's also an option. Right. Those are separate stages. Okay, that's a little awkward. So you can see here, our thrust to weight is much lower than it was previously, which was why I would prefer to run these a little lower down, but the overexpansion damage means we'd have to modify the engines somewhat, and I'm pretty content with how the engines are right now. I think another shell is going to end up being a necessity here. So this will be a shell that feeds into here, fires probably on the ground to help lift itself, which would mean it would have to be Methylox. I don't know. This would have to fire later, right? Time to apoapsis is going down. It's 34 right now. Our thrust to weight is actually looking kind of okay. We're still lacking on delta V, to be clear. So we're not going to achieve orbit here, but this is non-terrible at this point. Let's put our pitch at about 30. And you can see that drops our apoapsis a fair amount quicker, which isn't surprising. But this is definitely going to be a longer burn time. Our orbital velocity is going up at this time. Thrust to weight is positive. We are a little bit low on our apoapsis here, although time to apoapsis is starting to slow a little bit. We would really want to pitch a little bit more up here because we don't want to reach the apoapsis at this point. Okay, so this is now 80 kilometers. We are now officially out of the atmosphere, but we're at our apoapsis right now. And we're just holding this position. So this is definitely not ideal, and we're basically out of fuel. So, I mean, we've got a long ways to go on this. I think one more shell that is set up for... I don't want to recover this. Undo and exit. If we detach the SRBs and put in a shell in between the SRB and this stage, that shell would also be running off of Methylox, but it would be optimized for sea level burns. And then that would hopefully burn longer than the SRBs, would be the idea. Or after the SRBs. Not sure about that yet. If it was after the SRBs... Hang on. I'm having a dumb idea. What happens if we simply duplicate this again? So that would be right here. We duplicate this, and we would need to change the position on that, of course. But then we would clone all of this like so. Something like that, although these positions are not great. So it would be something a bit more like that-ish, hypothetically, although this guy could come up here, this one could come up this way, this one could come this way. It'd be something kind of like that. And then we need to drop the position down. So we need to go in here. There we go. That's the correct thing. We drop that down to be approximately there or so. Actually, a little lower than that. Approximately there. And then we would make sure that this had fuel feed enabled. It does. Okay. And then we would grab these guys and put them back out over here at an angle of 180, like that. Okay, so it would be something like this. Hypothetically. I don't think we'd have the fuel flow, and I'm concerned about some of that clipping, but it's a start anyway. Let's run a quick test on that. We have, I mean, we're past time for needing to put a cut in, but I wanted to get this idea out there. We would probably want to consolidate these engines together and make them like ground optimized or something. I'm looking at our thrust to weight here. It's kind of okay, actually. The SRBs are going to get us a ways off the ground anyway. Definitely the SRBs are not quite as strong as they were. Okay, so we do something kind of like this. And that's right away 0.89 thrust to weight, 0.9. I want to check the fuel flow here. Okay, it's definitely pulling from the outside in, but it's not pulling at maximum velocity, right? So this connection here is not necessarily ideal. We're not going to have perfect fuel flow here. This is still quite low thrust to weight, so I would like to change around these engines. But that's probably the... I don't want to destroy that craft. Undo and exit. That's probably the way that we're going to go. But it is time to put a cut in here, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And next episode, we're going to optimize these engines out here for sure. We'll probably keep these most likely, or maybe make them a little bit more high altitude optimized. We'll see about that. But for now, it is time to do that. So you can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings. And a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Atala, Andy Magar, Ali Lee, Dark Horse, Xenocyte, Hiro Marutsu, Upper Cumberland Gamers, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, The Lounge STL, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.